This is not a diplomatic misunderstanding. This is a strategic failure. In a single morning press conference on January 22nd, 2026, Mexico made a declaration that Washington was never supposed to hear out loud. Economic dependence on the United States is no longer safe. And with that sentence, nearly $4.1 trillion in combined economic gravity quietly shifted north and south away from Washington and toward Ottawa. While Donald Trump mocks allies, threatens sovereignty, and treats North America like a hierarchy instead of a partnership, Canada is doing something far more dangerous to American power. It is building an exit. Mexico did not choose confrontation, it chose calculation. Standing beside the logic laid out days earlier at Davos by Mark Carney, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum made it official. There is now a third path for middle powers, and it does not run through Washington. This is where the story turns explosive. Because while the United States was busy threatening tariffs, joking about annexation, and brandishing military language, Canada and Mexico were designing something else entirely. A North American economy that can function without America at the center. Ask yourself this. Why would two of America's closest trade partners deliberately begin replacing United States agricultural inputs, energy flows, and infrastructure access unless Washington had already become the risk? This was not emotional. This was not ideological. This was a verdict. And it raises a question the United States is not ready to answer. How did Trump's aggression push America's own continent to start planning a future without it? Pause here, because the economic reality behind this move is far more dangerous than the politics. To understand why this moment matters, you have to strip away the speeches and look at the plumbing of the North American economy. For 3 decades, the continent functioned on a single assumption. The United States was the stable core. Supply chains were optimized around just-in-time delivery, minimal redundancy, and deep cross-border integration. Agriculture, energy, manufacturing, and logistics were all designed on the belief that Washington would never weaponize interdependence. That assumption is now broken. Start with agriculture. The United States has long dominated oilseed flows in North America, particularly soy and canola adjacent products. Mexico is one of the largest importers of oilseeds and animal feed inputs on the continent. But here is the uncomfortable reality for Washington. Canada is the world's largest exporter of canola, controlling roughly 60% of global supply. When Mexico signals it will replace United States oilseed imports with Canadian canola, this is not symbolism. It is supply substitution. And supply substitution is permanent. Once feed mills, crushers, and logistics contracts are retooled, there is no economic incentive to switch back. The marginal cost of change is paid once. After that, loyalty disappears. Now look at energy. Canada is the 4th largest energy producer on Earth. Mexico is energy hungry, industrializing, and increasingly determined to avoid dependence on United States infrastructure choke points, especially pipelines, grid interconnections, and pricing hubs that can be politically manipulated. When Canada opens its energy market southward to Mexico, bypassing traditional United States-centric routes, it is doing something radical, breaking America's infrastructure leverage. This is not theoretical. Energy markets respond to reliability, not rhetoric. Once alternative flows are proven stable, capital follows. Contracts lock in. Risk premiums drop, but only for the new route. And here is the deeper issue Washington missed. Modern supply chains are not patriotic. They are mathematical. They follow probability-weighted risk. Trump's threats, tariffs, insults, military language did not scare Canada and Mexico into compliance. They repriced the United States as a risk factor. That is fatal in a just-in-time world. When a single political actor can disrupt pricing, access, or legality overnight, firms do not protest. They reroute. This is why the Carney-Sheinbaum alignment matters. It is not about friendship. It is about risk diversification at continental scale. The United States assumed interdependence guaranteed obedience. Instead, it triggered redesign. And redesign, once begun, does not stop. The next phase is where the damage becomes visible inside the United States itself. This is where Trump's strategy doesn't just fail. It turns inward. Because the first casualties of this so-called hardline posture are not Canadian officials or Mexican negotiators. They are American farmers, American refiners, American logistics firms, and American port authorities, many of them located in states that were never supposed to be collateral damage. Take agriculture. When Mexico begins shifting oilseed and feedstock contracts away from the United States and toward Canada, the immediate impact is not abstract. It hits farm income in the Midwest and along the Gulf logistics corridor. Grain elevators sit underutilized. Export terminals face volume volatility, and price discovery becomes brutal. An American oilseed exporter does not lose market share gradually. They lose it over an IGAT when a buyer signs a multi-year contract elsewhere. Industry associations already understand this risk. One senior agricultural logistics executive privately summarized the situation this way. Once Mexico rewires its feed supply, we don't get a second chance. This isn't politics. This is capacity planning. Now look at energy. Refineries and energy traders in Texas and Louisiana have long benefited from their role as intermediaries processing, pricing, and transporting energy flows between Canada, Mexico, and global markets. When Canada and Mexico begin coordinating energy access directly, the United States loses more than leverage. It loses toll revenue. That loss shows up in balance sheets, not headlines. Ports feel it next. Reduced cross-border volumes weaken hubs in New York, Florida, and Maine, where integrated North American trade once provided predictable throughput. Shipping lines reroute. Insurance premiums adjust. Financing terms tighten. And here's the political irony. These disruptions do not produce dramatic protests. They produce quiet attrition layoffs, blamed on market conditions, delayed expansions, canceled capital expenditures, damage that never traces back cleanly to a single speech, but compounds relentlessly. Meanwhile, Trump's rhetoric accelerates the cycle. Every insult towards sovereignty, every tariff threat, every suggestion that allies are subordinate. Each one confirms the same conclusion in boardrooms. The United States is no longer predictable, and unpredictability is poison. Trump believed pressure would force compliance. Instead, it forced exit planning. Canada and Mexico are not resisting the United States. They are pricing it out. And once markets internalize that logic, even a change in leadership cannot reverse it easily. Which brings us to the most dangerous part of this story, the counter strategy now unfolding behind Washington's back. While Washington argues in public, Canada and Mexico are building in private. This is the mistake the United States keeps making. Power does not collapse when someone announces it. Power collapses when alternatives quietly become functional. Behind the scenes, Ottawa and Mexico City are executing what officials now describe as strategic replacement, not retaliation, not escalation, but insulation. Start with infrastructure. Canada has spent years modernizing rail, port, and energy export capacity with one objective in mind: optional routing. The moment Trump turned trade into a loyalty test, that capacity became leverage. Rail corridors linking Western Canada to Pacific ports are no longer just Asia-facing. They are now part of a southbound strategy that bypasses United States choke points entirely. Mexico is adapting just as fast. New port investments on both coasts. Expanded rail integration with Canadian carriers. Logistics frameworks designed to settle trade in non-United States dollars where possible. None of this is symbolic. It is about removing Washington's veto power over continental trade flows. Energy is the keystone. Canada's willingness to open long-term energy access to Mexico changes the map. It reduces Mexico's exposure to United States pricing hubs, transit rules, and political interference. Once those flows stabilize, the United States loses its role as indispensable intermediary. And here is the strategic brilliance. Canada and Mexico are not acting alone. They are coordinating with the European Union, with Asian commodity buyers, and with alternative shipping insurers. This is not decoupling from the United States entirely. It is decoupling from dependence. Now add the geopolitical layer. In preparation for the 2026 review of CUSMA, Canada and Mexico are presenting a united front. This is unprecedented. For decades, Washington exploited asymmetry, pressuring one partner at a time with tariffs, threats, or exemptions. That playbook is now obsolete. A unified Canada-Mexico position means the United States cannot isolate targets. Tariffs lose effectiveness. Divide and conquer fails. This is why Trump's aggression backfired so badly. By insulting sovereignty, he created solidarity. By threatening punishment, he incentivized cooperation. By weaponizing access, he taught allies how to live without it. The most dangerous phrase in geopolitics is not enemy. It is, we no longer need you. And Canada and Mexico are dangerously close to saying it out loud. The question now is not whether the United States can stop this shift, but whether it even understands what it has already lost. What we are witnessing is not a trade dispute. It is a loss of trust, and in geopolitics, trust is the only asset that cannot be rebuilt on a timetable. For 30 years, the United States occupied a unique position in the Western Hemisphere, not just as the largest economy, but as the anchor of predictability. Allies accepted asymmetry because the system was stable. Rules were boring, processes were slow, but outcomes were reliable. Trump shattered that equilibrium. By treating sovereignty as negotiable, alliances as transactional, and economics as a weapon of humiliation, he introduced a permanent variable into North American decision-making: the risk of American caprice. And here is the part Washington still does not grasp. Even if Trump leaves office tomorrow, the damage does not reverse. Because Canada and Mexico are no longer reacting to a man. They are reacting to a pattern that proved the United States can and will weaponize interdependence when politically convenient. That realization changes everything. Once trust collapses, redundancy becomes policy. Once redundancy becomes policy, dependence disappears. Once dependence disappears, leverage dies. This is why the shift is irreversible. Supply chains redesigned to avoid United States choke points will not be rebuilt just to make Washington feel relevant again. Capital investments made to bypass American infrastructure will not be unwound. Legal frameworks written to protect against United States pressure will not be casually repealed. And while the United States bleeds influence, others gain. China does not need to replace the United States in North America. It only needs to offer predictability, financing, and non-interference. Every crack Trump creates is an invitation Beijing did not even have to issue. Russia benefits as well, not economically, but strategically. A fractured Western Hemisphere weakens collective diplomatic alignment, complicates sanctions enforcement, and distracts Washington inward. This is the true cost of arrogance. The United States believed dominance was permanent. It forgot that dominance is rented, and the rent is credibility. Canada and Mexico are no longer hedging against American decline in theory. They are engineering around it in practice. The unipolar moment in the Western Hemisphere did not end with a war. It ended with a press conference. And that brings us to the final question, one that should make every American uncomfortable. Power is never lost in a single dramatic moment. It erodes when partners stop trusting, stop consulting, and finally stop needing you. The United States did not lose influence in North America because Canada or Mexico turned hostile. It lost influence because arrogance replaced stability and threats replaced leadership. Trump believed pressure creates obedience. History shows it creates alternatives. Canada and Mexico did not rebel. They adapted. And adaptation is far more dangerous than resistance. Once an economic system proves it can function without you, your leverage is gone forever. No speech can restore it. No election can rewind it. No apology can undo contracts already signed and infrastructure already built. This is not a downturn. This is not a pause. This is a structural shift. So here is the question Washington must face, and the question I want you to debate in the comments. If America's closest neighbors no longer trust it as a partner, can the United States still claim leadership in the Western Hemisphere, or has it already priced itself out of its own continent? The answer will define the next decade.